wars of the future are likely to be fought over water. This basic element, fundamental to our survival on Earth, is becoming scarcer with climate change and population growth. Today on Eco India, let's understand how we got here and what can be done to tackle this problem. Hello and welcome, I'm Sanuta Raghu. Let's start in Kashmir. The region is flanked by the Himalayas in the northeast and is drained by many large and small rivers. In the last 100 years, climate change has caused an average temperature rise of 1.2 degrees Celsius here, causing glaciers to melt. Farmers in the region have got a raw deal. They're having to prepare for possible floods while also battling unseasonal snow right before the harvest.
Once again, the snow arrived too early in Indian-administered Kashmir in mid-October for the third year running. Apple grower Abdul Hamid Ghani despairs. He has to shake the snow off his trees. It's weighing down the branches.
Just look at the trees. They're all destroyed. The same thing happened the previous 2 years.
Snow and frost severely affect the quality of the apples. A crate of fruit damaged by bad weather will sell for just 600 rupees, half the normal price. The early winter didn't take Abdul Hamid Ghani completely by surprise. He'd heard the weather forecast on the radio. He simply didn't believe it. Now, he regrets that he didn't take action. The warning was issued by the Meteorological Center, Srinagar. Director Sonam Lotus and his team monitor the whole region and keep the general public informed via the media about increasingly frequent extreme weather events.
Consequences of climate change triggered by global warming is a reality in Jammu Kashmir and parts of Ladakh. There are so many indicators like extreme intensity and distribution of the snow, the time, space and intensity of weather systems and severity has increased a lot.
80% of India's apples come from the Kashmir Valley in the Himalayan foothills. If apple growers lose half their harvest due to early snowfall for a third year running, the entire region will suffer. The sector is worth an annual 50 billion rupees, some 590 million euros, accounting for a third of the region's economy. The Kashmir Horticulture Department is looking for ways to safeguard the sector.
We need to transform the sector by introducing new varieties and improving soil fertility. In the last few years, we have brought in new varieties and planted high-density types that yield fruit before the early snowfall and are of good quality.
These new varieties have been planted on roughly 250 hectares of land and blossom after the frost. Additional supports ensure they can withstand high winds, and netting protects them against hailstones. Saffron farmers are also having to adapt to changing climate conditions. Here in the Pampore Highlands, 1600 meters above sea level, the fields are still carpeted in purple flowers. But the number of farmers growing the precious spice is dwindling.
Saffron production has been declining since 2014 due to climate change events such as drought. Dry weather has damaged most of our seeds.
There is less rainfall here than there used to be, and global warming is also shrinking glaciers across the Himalayan region, so there is less meltwater feeding into rivers. The government has a vested interest in protecting the saffron farming sector. The crop makes up 16% of the region's agriculture revenue. So the government is investing in irrigation systems for farmers. Scientists are supporting the project.
Farmers, they should irrigate these saffron fields from 25th of August to 5th of September. That is the critical time. If farmers, they will irrigate their fields
during these 10 days, they can enhance the yield of saffron by 40%.
Improved yields would make the crop more attractive to farmers again. But many of the planned irrigation systems are not yet operational. Apple grower Abdul Hamid Ghani has no idea what the future holds. Should he switch to new varieties of apples? It would be years before they bear fruit. For now, he's doing his best to salvage his trees.
This branch is tied, but I don't think it can be saved. Take a look at the crack in this branch. It's completely split. And take a look at the tree's higher limbs. I tried to repair them, but
He had hoped to leave his orchards to his son, as his grandfather and his father did before him. But now he fears they won't provide a steady income and will only be a burden on his family.
In today's day and age, water has become a political and an economic tool. States with more water have more leverage. Some industries are prioritized over others when it comes to water supply. This causes inequalities and ultimately an unsustainable planet. Let's take a closer look to unpack this better.
Two regions across the planet from each other with the same problem. They're running out of water. This past spring in Klamath, Oregon, farmers' wells ran dry. The groundwater levels in Punjab were so low, NASA alerted India about it. And they're not alone. Around 4 billion people experience severe water scarcity at least 1 month a year. And when the water runs low, more comes at a cost. So, why are we running out? And who is profiting? Just 1% of the water on Earth sustains all life, and it doesn't just disappear. It travels around the planet in what's called the water cycle. Let's quickly brush up on that. When the air is hot, it warms the water. Water then evaporates into the atmosphere. There it cools and condenses, forming clouds. They move around the planet horizontally in what are called atmospheric rivers. When there's enough water in a cloud, it rains. And if it's cold enough, it snows. In the spring, snow melts to feed rivers, providing a source of water to the land during the coming hot months of the year. But climate change is messing this all up. Rising temperatures mean more water falling as rain instead of snow, and the little snow there is evaporates rather than flowing downstream. Less snow means less water during the summer. In short, climate change speeds up the water cycle. More evaporation, more rain, more drought, and less water for us. And as the world population grows, we're using more and more of it. The question is, for what? Well, 70% of it goes to agriculture, and to support those levels, we've changed the natural way waters flow.
Especially in the 50s, 60s, but also later, we've seen really a boom of dam building because everyone wanted, for good reasons, to use water resources to lift people out of poverty and to boost economic development.
Susanna Schmeier is an associate professor in water law and diplomacy at IHE Delft, an education facility specifically dedicated to water.
Not only with dams, but generally with all water infrastructure that benefits a certain economic use or a certain sector over others, especially local communities, you have an increase in inequality in terms of who's using water.
That's what happened in Klamath, Oregon, where a series of dams supplied water to alfalfa and potato farms. River water levels dropped, and fish populations important to the region's indigenous people plummeted. 11,620 kilometers east, in Punjab, India, communities are facing a similar issue.
Because of significant agricultural activity and depending on the or dependence on the groundwater, there is a significant groundwater depletion in Punjab, which is visible even from the satellite.
Samrat Basak is a hydrologist by training and researches urban water challenges and solutions. India started using more agricultural chemicals during the Green Revolution in the 1960s. Crop production expanded and significantly reduced famine. Punjab started supplying the country and later the world with rice, but at the expense of its groundwater. There are now policies in place to improve the situation, but the water table hasn't recovered. Meanwhile, local people's wells are running dry. And what do you do then? Well, you drill a deeper well.
The challenge is that everyone may not have the right affordability to drill deeper every time to access groundwater. In such cases, people are depending on the external sources of water.
They can be water tankers or bottled water. But
of course, those water are far more costlier than the water that is supplied by the government.
On average, people with less money spend a higher percentage of their income on water. A minimum wage worker in the UK spent 0.1% of their income on safe water. In India, the country with the largest number of people lacking safe water, a low-income person spends 17% of their household income on water. In Madagascar, purchased water sucks up 45% of a low-wage worker's income. And lack of water causes more harm than just thirst. Persistent dehydration has severe health implications, and fetching water usually falls to women and girls, subjecting them to increased risk for assault. And water scarcity can also cause psychological trauma.
You can't even imagine that when you are in a queue for 1 or 2 hours, and when you are trying to when your turn comes, you are pushing the pump with the hope that maybe I will get some water, and that water is not coming.
Dr. Deepti Acharya is the author of a new book about the right to water. She was motivated to research the topic by her experience living with water scarcity.
So for me, I think water stress is beyond the figures. It is, I think, emotional loss,
And this emotional loss creates a market. Like for private water providers, who might take over when governments fail to provide clean water.
This might have positive short-term effects because if the company wants to make money, it's going to make sure that the water is clean, provided on time, regularly, and so on, because that's the way they make money.
And that's exactly what companies on the S&P Global Water Index are doing. It contains 50 international companies that provide water utilities and services like purification. As clean water becomes scarcer, these companies' services are more in demand. And the more business they get, the more investors earn. But privatizing isn't always the way to go. In many cases, it doesn't live up to expectations. That's because in most cases, privatized water is also more expensive.
A lot of people will fall through the grid and then not have water at all anymore.
There are those ready to profit from this situation as well. In India, many water tanks are controlled by a so-called water mafia.
They have started stealing water. They are collecting it, they are putting it in tanks, they are selling it. So their investment is zero, but their profit is 100%.
And then there's the bottled water industry, which is worth almost $3 billion and expected to grow by around 7% per year. Major players in the market include Coca-Cola and Nestle, which have been accused of both causing and profiting from water scarcity. In the United States and Canada, for example, Coke takes water from municipal sources, bottles it, and sells it to people who often don't have clean water at home. In India and Mexico, Coke was accused of severely depleting groundwater after opening bottling plants. And Nestle has come under fire for over-extracting water from Native American reservations in water-stressed California. So is there any way to ensure more people have safe, affordable, available water? Investing in infrastructure is the most direct way to improve access, both repairing broken or damaged pipes and building new connections, as well as wastewater recycling facilities. Another direct way is to reduce meat consumption, and the vast majority of our freshwater feeds industrial agriculture. Going further, starting a process of decommissioning dams and letting watershed ecosystems regenerate helps tackle the root of the problem. On the Klamath River, 4 hydroelectric dams are scheduled to be torn down in the next few years. Another push is to give nature rights in the courtroom. This would mean people could bring court cases on behalf of rivers, for example, against their polluters. The Yurok tribe established rights of nature for the Klamath River in 2019. Still, the main problems remain. Much of the planet's freshwater is unsustainably managed, and climate change means there's less for us to use. But changing our diets and restoring our ecosystems can make a difference.
Now, sea level rise is one of the most visible impacts of climate change. Indonesia, with its thousands of islands, is at particular risk. To protect its 270 million residents, the country is working on solutions that could help mitigate this problem. Let's see how.
Rayuti has to get the water out of her house. Bailing is now part of her morning routine. Then she hopes the water will recede enough to make the roads passable. Only then can she leave home to take her son Dana to school.
If it's flooded, I can't get him to school. There's no way to get past the water. Try, and you'll fall into the abyss.
Her family lives in Semenet, a village in the city of Pekalongan, in the north of Indonesia's Java Island. For almost 20 years, villagers watched the sea level rise steadily. Then 2 years ago, water from the Java Sea began spilling into Semenet, submerging homes, roads, and fields. Indonesia is comprised of some 17,000 islands. Many could struggle to keep afloat.
If the temperature will continue to increase by more than 2 degrees within the next 60 or 70 years, more than 1,500 islands in Indonesia will actually getting flooded and sink.
The rising sea is also threatening Pekalongan, as well as the capital Jakarta and other big industrial cities in Indonesia. Now a 30-kilometer-long wall, seen in this animation, is to be built to protect Jakarta from the floodwaters. The project is expected to cost billions of euros. Until it's finished, the government is relocating to the neighboring island of Borneo. Protect the coast or resettle people. It's a choice faced by numerous countries in Asia.
If you take a country like Vietnam, it is estimated that even in a positive scenario of about a 1 meter sea level rise, it is estimated that about 24,000 square kilometers of the country would go underwater. That is 10% of the territory of Vietnam. And because Vietnam is primarily a very long coast, it will be impossible for the government to build a dike all along the coast.
But Indonesia isn't just threatened by the rising sea. The land people live on is itself sinking. Whether in Jakarta or Pekalongan, groundwater exploitation is to blame. Private households, office buildings, and industry all extract too much.
Industry in Pekalongan on average requires large amounts of water, both for the cultivation of rice for ice factories, fishing, services, hospitality. All of that has to be taken from the groundwater, because the state water company doesn't provide us with enough water.
As a result, the loose sandy soil gives way, subsiding at an even faster rate than the sea is rising. It's estimated that in 15 years' time, some 80% of Java's northern coastal plain will be underwater. Possible solutions include pumping less groundwater and preserving or replanting mangrove forests, which act as a natural protective barrier against rising floodwaters. Low wages make Indonesia a popular production location for foreign investors, whose businesses deplete local natural resources. Experts say it's time for a radical rethink.
There should be accelerated economic transformations whereby it's not only about the income, it's not only about the GDP or poverty alleviations, but also how this the economic development should also consider the environmental aspect really in the planning and in the implementations.
But Semonet is running out of time. The tide keeps rising. Around 40 families have already moved away. It's likely the remaining residents will soon have to follow them and leave their village to be claimed by the sea.
Preparing the coming generation to equip themselves with facts, context and solutions to environmental problems has become a priority for many schools in India in the last decade. Our team spoke to a few individuals and organizations who are at the forefront of this effort. Let's meet them to find out what works and what doesn't when it comes to teaching children about building a sustainable planet.
The climate is on the curriculum at this school in the western state of Maharashtra. India is one of the few countries in the world that's made the study of the environment a compulsory subject, thanks to a Supreme Court directive in 2003. But experience has shown that when children are cooped up in classrooms, dry textbooks do little to ignite their interest.
We do need to have children first fall in love with nature, which means they need to be able to touch soil, they need to be able to climb trees, they need to be able to peer into leaves and look for caterpillars and signature spiders. And once they start doing that, is when environmental education has kicked in and you start talking to them about the pressing issues that we are facing.
Issues like pollution, water conservation and climate change that all feature in Bijal Vacharajani's books for children. By inviting the author into the classroom, Mumbai's Akshara High School has found an interactive way to give students a deeper understanding of the scope of the climate crisis.
Because Bijal has kind of approached it in a very lighter way, and her books speak the voice of the teenager that we are talking to. It really has opened up those opportunities to have first conversation and then awareness, which comes much later.
My understanding of the climate change, after this session, it has expanded a lot more. I got to know about what animals are facing. Not only animals, what people as well are facing. Droughts are there, extinction is there. All this is very tough to get an exposure to all these things.
Time outdoors with hands-on activities like planting also help foster a relationship to nature. Now, books and school lessons aren't the only things raising children's awareness about the environment in India. The Scrappy Children's News Service is a TV program highlighting environmental issues. It's produced and anchored by kids who report on problems like waste and the lack of space to play in their neighborhoods.
हम लोग दोस्त लोग और लोग भी आते खेलते हैं, पर इधर बहुत गंदगी है. उधर ये गटर है, इधर नाला है, अच्छा उधर मच्छी पकड़ते हैं. इधर सब लोग बाथरूम करते हैं.
The show was started in 2017 by the Indian non-profit organization Going to School. It airs on 2 national TV stations, on online platforms, and is shown in government schools. To date, it's featured reports from more than 2,000 children across different Indian states, often from underprivileged communities. With a focus on solution finding, the format is quirky and engaging.
It's not, how do I say this, kind of didactic, worthy, education where you're kind of going, oh no, it's boring again. No, it's looking for solutions in a wacky way and saying there's no wrong way to go about problem solving. It just means that you have to start.
In a country still striving to achieve universal literacy, Scrappy News is helping to get the message out to young and old. Though children are least responsible for climate change, they are set to bear the biggest burden of its impacts.
3, 2, 1, be scrappy! धीरज, क्या तुम गेस कर सकते हैं बड़ी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम्स के बीच में कौन है? नहीं, लड़कियाँ, बच्चे। इन सब बड़ी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम्स के बीच में है हम सब।
सही बोला वेलेस्का, हम सब साथ मिलकर सब कुछ ठीक कर सकते हैं।
हम साथ मिलकर बनते हैं स्क्रैपी न्यूज।
3, 2, 1, be scrappy!
Today, climate change is a fact and not an opinion anymore. Our world has a long way to go to fully buy into this fact and take action to stop our extractive practices. But I hope today's episode has shown you that change for the better is possible. I'll leave you with that thought and see you again next week. From all of us in India and Germany, goodbye and thanks for watching.